So I figured I'd try something different this time. This is Lunchtime Science. I've been slack on getting my long form videos out, so to save time, I'm going to film it as I eat. During this video, I'm going to be giving my take on this study. The goal of the study was to meta-analyze and systematically review the effects of squat range of motion on a variety of outcomes, including hypertrophy, strength, sport success, power, and body fat percentage. Meta-analyze just means they took all of this data from all the studies and drew a conclusion based off of that, meaning the context of which is better, partial range of motion or full range of motion, will be in relation to the benefits of this list. When grouped by outcome, standardized mean difference all favored full range of motion training, but these effects were trivial to small at best. So what was their conclusion? Overall, our results suggest that using a full or long range of motion may enhance results for most outcomes, but differences in adaptations are trivial to small. As such, partial range of motion resistance training might present an efficacious alternative for variation in personal preference or where injury prevents full range of motion training. So based on the conclusion of the author, you might conclude that it doesn't matter whether you train partial range or full range of motion training, or if it does matter, it just doesn't matter all that much. I've already done my own digging on the study, and I've come up with my own conclusion. So I'm going to state that right now and reverse out from there. After examining the study, I came away unimpressed with the current research available on the topic. I don't think we've scoured all that we can on the topic, and methods need to be better before we can conclusively state that there is no difference between full range of motion squatting and partial range of motion squatting as far as the benefit. It's my opinion based on anecdotal observation, fueled by the said principle, that there are differences, perhaps not in superiority, but in effect of partial range versus full range. What is the said principle? Specific adaptation to impose demand. It's an observed phenomenon in the body. For a given demand imposed upon it, the body will respond by bolstering the body against that demand. A simple example is for runners. If you run 1 mile a day for the next year, your body will create adaptations in the heart, the lungs, the delivery of oxygen to the tissues in such a way that you'll be much more efficient in running 1 mile a day. There's other things in play, but that's the gist of the principle. Something along this line of thought I enjoyed that the authors touched upon is, quote, analysis suggested the existence of a specificity aspect to range of motion such that training in the range of motion being tested as an outcome resulted in greater strength adaptations. This means that even the testing position affected the measured outcomes. So if you test closer to a short range of motion in the squat and you're a participant that trained a short range of motion in the squat, your outcomes are going to be better versus one that trained in a full range of motion in the squat. Context matters, which brings me to the next point. What is partial range and what is full range as explained in the study? Going to table 1, which summarizes the results, things get a bit murky. Partial range is classified anywhere from 20 to 90 degrees depending on the study, and full range is classified anywhere from 70 to 140 degrees depending on the study, meaning they overlap, and 6 studies had no specific classification whatsoever. Here's a concerning quote from the researchers. For most studies, a certain amount of range of motion was deemed a full range of motion, regardless of what individual's full range of motion actually was. So the designation of full range wasn't even individualized for most of the studies. This is why that can be problematic. Let's say full range squat is arbitrarily set at around 70 degrees, which was the case for a few of these studies. For this example, we want to know if full range training has effects on strength development for a group of, let's say, 10 athletes. If the full range of motion for 7 out of 10 of those athletes is even just 90 degrees, I think we can reasonably say nearly all athletes can squat at least, if not greater than 90 degrees. But if that's the case, you now have 70% of the participants actually training relative partial range of motion, but they're now being factored into full range of motion training for the statistics. Can you see how that can become a bit problematic? How can we be sure this did not play a role in the statistics? Simply put, we can't. We need to let science guide our decision making. What is science? Quote, the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation, experimentation, and the testing of theories against the evidence obtained. Observation, experimentation, and the testing of theories. That's science. The beauty of science is that it's a pursuit of truth, not an authoritative statement of what truth is. So with all the arguments that one can come up with in a topic like this, it's important to rip things back down to context and then educate on what we do know, so we can still enjoy the process of attempting to discover what we don't. So what do we know? Athletes whose sports are played in a short range often do benefit from training in a full range. Now, does that mean we throw out anything that's not a full range of motion squat? No! If that's the case, say goodbye to walking, say goodbye to sitting, and say goodbye to anything that's not a deep squat. Context matters. When you aren't training in a full range, you have the wonderful opportunity to zero in on the intricate connective tissue of the joints targeted. And this is just physics. Let's take a single leg stance, for example. Based on this graph from Dr. Aaron Swanson, the more shallow I train the knee joint, the greater load is placed on the connective tissue. tissue, think ACL, meniscus, joint capsule, due to the elimination of more muscle groups from the equation. Who doesn't want a strong and durable ACL or diamond strong VMO muscle? That's what you get when you're training on one leg in the anterior direction. Now let's just shift the focus a bit. Moving more posterior, hips behind heels, we can then start to open up the capsule of the hip joint, which is often tight and thrusted forward due to hours spent sitting in a chair or driving in your car. If the deep squat grants you greater strength and muscle development, the partial squat forward grants you greater connective tissue development in the knee, and the partial squat backward grants you greater connective tissue access in the hip. Why pit the two against each other? Why not just use both? This is exactly what I do on my programming system, cycling a knee and hip session each week where I target full range squats, full range RDLs, while targeting partial range of motion squats forward and backward, getting the best of both worlds, balancing the body with exercise. If you like this style of video, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment below for another topic or research study that you'd like me to dig into that you've had questions about. Here's to a greater pursuit of truth.